Their mother passed away, and the stepmother locked the two sisters in the basement. Until one day, the two sisters heard a noise. The morning started like any other, with soft rays of sunlight pouring through the old lace curtains in the family's cozy home. But for Amber and Ashley, today would be unlike any other, a day that changed everything. Their father, Billy, called them into the kitchen, his face pale and hands trembling slightly. His words came out in fragments, as though he were fighting a wave of emotion he couldn't hold back. I have to tell you something, girls." His voice wavered, and he looked away, unable to meet their wide, searching eyes. Amber, the eldest, felt a cold sensation creeping over her, sensing something was terribly wrong. She glanced at her younger sister, Ashley, who held onto her doll, blissfully unaware of the heavy news lingering in the air. "Your mother—" "She's gone," Billy whispered, his voice breaking. It was as if Amber's heart had been struck, and she struggled to grasp the reality of it. Gone? How could their mother be gone? Ashley's expression turned blank, and then, snapping out of shock, she let out a scream, clutching tightly to Amber. They held each other, sobbing as the world shifted into an unfamiliar, sorrowful reality they never saw coming. Their mother, who had kissed their foreheads each night, wiped away their tears, and sung them to sleep, was gone forever. The following days drifted by in a blur. Their home, once brimming with laughter and warmth, grew silent and cold. Billy tried his best to comfort them, but his own intense grief was weighing him down. He was all they had left, but fate had more in store. Just weeks after their mother's passing, Billy was involved in a car accident, leaving him weak and bedridden. The girls watched as he lay in their parents' bed, his face pale, his frame frail. He was nothing like the strong father who had once lifted them up high, filling their world with joy. Every day his voice grew softer, his once lively spirit fading, trapped in a body that could no longer keep up. Amber and Ashley soon found themselves under the care of their stepmother, Virginia, who had arrived shortly after the accident. Virginia was a striking figure, tall, commanding, and beautiful, but with a coldness that was impossible to ignore. Her gaze, icy and sharp, settled on them with a mix of frustration and something far more unsettling. There was contempt that made Amber's skin crawl. At first, she tried to convince herself that maybe Virginia was just different, that her strictness masked some hidden pain. But that hope soon faded. Virginia enforced rules, strict ones that Amber had never experienced before. They couldn't speak to their father without her approval, and even sitting in the same room with him was restricted. Virginia claimed it was to give him peace, but Amber noticed the way his eyes would follow them, filled with a quiet sadness each time they were rushed out. One afternoon, after Amber pleaded to see her father, she found herself locked in the basement for the first time. The cold, damp air was thick as she looked at the closed door, her heart pounding in fear. Ashley was kept upstairs, made to sit quietly while Amber endured her punishment. When Virginia finally let her out, her words were as sharp as knives. "You girls will learn to obey me," she said, her voice low and chilling. "Your mother spoiled you, but I won't allow that here. Not anymore." Amber shivered, but swallowed her fear, vowing to shield Ashley from the same fate. From then on, she observed Virginia closely, noting her every move. She watched as Virginia sneaked into their parents' room at night, rummaging through drawers, taking small items and slipping them into her pockets. The way Virginia's fingers lingered on her mother's locket one night made Amber's blood run cold. It seemed as if Virginia wanted to erase all traces of their mother from the house. Days turned to weeks, and the punishments grew harsher. Even Ashley, with her innocent questions and gentle voice, wasn't spared Virginia's anger. One evening, Ashley asked, "When "Can we see Papa again?" Her voice was soft, but Virginia's reaction was swift. She grabbed Ashley's arm, dragging her down to the basement with Amber. The door slammed shut, leaving the two girls alone in the dark, damp air. "Amber," Ashley whispered, clinging tightly to her. "Why is she so cruel? What did we ever do?" Amber held her sister close, gently smoothing Ashley's golden curls as best she could in the dim light. "It's not your fault, Ashley. None of this is on us," she said, her voice trembling, though she tried to sound steady for both their sakes. "We just have to be brave a little longer. Papa's going to get better soon, and everything will be okay again." But deep down, Amber wondered if that would ever be true. Her father, Billy, seemed weaker with each passing day, and Virginia only grew more controlling, her grip over the household and the girls tightening. The sisters learned to tiptoe around Virginia, fearing her cold glares, her sharp voice, and the dreadful sound of the basement door locking behind them. One night, as they lay huddled in the dark, Amber caught the faint sound of a voice from above. It was their father's voice, weak and strained, calling out for them. Amber's heart leapt with hope, and she squeezed Ashley's hand. "Did you hear that, Ashley? It's Papa. He's calling us." But the moment was fleeting, as they soon heard Virginia's unyielding footsteps moving toward their father's room. His voice diminished, and then there was silence. Amber's heart sank, realizing Virginia wouldn't let him see them, or even know they were down there, trapped in the cold. As days passed, Amber noticed something even more disturbing. Precious family heirlooms, pieces her mother had treasured and lovingly cared for, began to disappear. Amber remembered how her mother's hands would gently polish an old silver mirror, a gift from her grandmother, and trace the intricate designs. Now, that mirror was gone. When Amber tried to ask Virginia about it, she was met with a cold stare and a harsh reply. "That old junk doesn't belong here anymore," Virginia snapped. "This is my home now, and I'll decide what stays and what goes." Amber's heart ached, and she fought back tears. It was as if Virginia was slowly erasing her mother's memory, taking away everything that had been hers, leaving only a hollow emptiness behind. And as days turned into weeks, the girls' confinement only worsened. Virginia grew harsher, using every slip-up and every tear as an excuse to lash out. Meals became scarce, with the warm dinners their mother used to make replaced by scraps and leftovers, just barely enough to keep the hunger at bay. Amber watched Ashley's cheeks turn pale, the spark in her once bright eyes fading. Late one night, certain Virginia was fast asleep, Amber whispered to Ashley, "We have to be strong. We'll get through this somehow," though she felt the emptiness of her own words. The cold, damp basement air only amplified the sense of despair. Then one dark, silent evening, as the sisters huddled together for warmth, Amber heard something that sent a chill through her. Virginia's voice, faint through the crack in the basement door. "I'll make sure they're gone soon enough," Virginia muttered to herself, her tone dark and menacing. After hearing Virginia's ominous words, Amber struggled to sleep, her mind racing to grasp just how far Virginia's cruelty might reach. Morning offered no comfort. Virginia flung the basement door open with a sneer, tossed a single slice of bread onto the steps, and left without a word. Amber and Ashley split the meager breakfast in silence, too fearful to speak, both sensing that the situation was spiraling into something worse. The days dragged on, filled with long, tense hours in the dark, only broken by Virginia's footsteps above, moving through the house like a cold shadow that haunted their every move. Unable to stand the silence any longer, Amber decided she had to act. She knew they couldn't keep going on like this, and she clung to the hope that someone in their family might still care. Someone who hadn't fallen for Virginia's charm had to be out there. Amber waited for the sound of Virginia's car engine, listening closely as it faded down the driveway one morning. Sure that Virginia was gone for errands, she climbed the basement stairs, cracked the door open, and looked into the empty house. Taking Ashley's hand, she whispered, "Let's call Aunt Brenda. She'll know what to do." They crept down the hallway to the old beige telephone sitting on a small table by the wall. Amber's heart raced as she dialed her aunt's number. Aunt Brenda, her mother's sister, had always been a comforting figure, filling their childhood with warmth and laughter. Amber clung to the hope that Aunt Brenda would be willing to help. The phone rang several times before a rough voice answered. "Hello, Aunt Brenda. It's Amber," she said, her voice wavering. We need your help." Silence filled the line. "Amber, where's your father? Why are you calling me?" Aunt Brenda's voice sounded cold, almost dismissive. He's not well," Amber managed. "He's bedridden, and—" But Aunt Brenda cut her off. Her tone turned sharp, distant. "Amber, I told your mother I didn't want to be involved in any of this. I've got my own life to deal with. You're both old enough to look after yourselves." Her voice carried a trace of irritation. "Don't call me again. This is Virginia's responsibility, not mine." The line went silent. Amber stood there, frozen, the empty dial tone echoing in her ear. She could barely process the coldness in her aunt's voice. The same aunt who once wrapped them in hugs, laughed with them, and comforted them through childhood scrapes and bruises. Now, she saw them as an inconvenience, a problem she didn't want to handle. The quiet around her felt suffocating. Ashley looked up at her with wide, worried eyes. "Is Aunt Brenda going to help us?" Amber swallowed back tears and forced a smile. She can't right now, Ashley, but maybe someone else can." She kneeled and hugged her sister, trying to shield her from the despair swelling within her. Amber now realized just how alone they truly were. Clinging to one last hope, she reached out to family friends who had once been close to her mother. She carefully wrote notes, leaving them in places where someone might see. A slip of paper under the door for the mailman, a note tucked in the branches of Mrs. Bailey's rose bush next door. Days passed, and still no one came. Nobody reached out. No familiar faces peered through the windows to check in. There weren't any notes of concern or simple gestures left behind. Amber felt a deep ache in her chest as the reality set in. Everyone seemed to have forgotten them, as if they didn't matter anymore. One afternoon, she spotted Mrs. Bailey trimming her roses just beyond the basement window. Desperately hopeful, Amber tapped softly on the glass, just enough to catch the older woman's eye, but Mrs. Bailey only cast a scornful glance, looked around as if she hadn't seen anything, and moved on, without a second thought. That evening, Amber and Ashley huddled in silence, the damp chill of the basement settling into their bones. Ashley leaned close to her sister, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Why won't anyone help us, Amber? Did we do something wrong?" Amber's throat tightened as she shook her head, struggling to find the words. She wanted to reassure Ashley that they hadn't done anything to deserve this. People were just busy, preoccupied with their own lives. Yet, deep down, a part of her wondered if they'd been forgotten on purpose, if people found it easier to look away than to step in. She wrapped her arms around Ashley, trying to shield her from the creeping darkness. Just then, a shadow darkened the doorway. Virginia stood there, a cold smirk twisting her lips. "You thought you could ask for help?" she sneered, her voice dripping with twisted satisfaction. "No one's coming for you, Amber. Not your dear Aunt Brenda, not the neighbors. No one." Her words were like daggers, slicing through Amber's hope as Virginia's gaze held a chilling satisfaction. "I'm all you've got now," Virginia continued with a twisted grin. "And you better remember that." With a harsh laugh, she slammed the door, leaving its echo ringing in their ears long after. Amber sat there, a weight pressing down on her, feeling as if the world had turned against them, closing them into a dark, endless void. That night, as Amber and Ashley lay together on the cold floor, Amber's mind raced, searching desperately for a flicker of hope. She thought back over every moment, every word exchanged, trying to remember if they'd missed some clue or chance to escape. And then, in the quiet, something came to her. A loose pipe in the corner of the basement. It was small, yet maybe just enough to make a difference. If she could create even a faint sound, there was a chance someone passing by might hear. It wasn't much to hold on to, but it was all they had left. Amber rose quietly, careful not to disturb Ashley, and moved toward the pipe. At first, she tapped lightly, then gradually increased the pressure, hoping the sound would carry through the walls. Her heart raced with the thought of someone hearing her, maybe even stopping to check. But only silence responded. Determined, she knocked again, harder, until her fingers throbbed. Just as she was about to give up, a distant sound reached her ears. A faint rustle, footsteps nearby. It was barely there, but she couldn't mistake it. Her breath caught in her throat. She knocked again, each tap more urgent than the last, but the footsteps slowly faded away, vanishing into the night. Defeated, Amber leaned back against the wall, tears streaming down as the heavy weight of isolation settled over her once more. No one had heard, no one was coming, and a deep part of her feared that no one ever would. She wrapped her arms around her sister, bracing for the reality that their escape might be something they'd have to find on their own, with no help, no rescue on the way. The next morning, the sound of footsteps stirred Amber from sleep. But this time, the footsteps didn't carry the promise of rescue. A dense sense of dread hung over her, thick and unshakable. Amber had barely rested, her mind still consumed by the failure of the night before. As the heavy steps approached the basement door, Amber fought to suppress her fear, steeling herself. Virginia's figure appeared in the doorway, her eyes cold and distant. Amber braced for the worst, expecting more punishment, but Virginia's next words caught her off guard. "You're coming upstairs," Virginia said bluntly. "Both of you." Amber's heart leapt at the thought of seeing their father, even if it was just a brief glimpse from across the room. She glanced over at Ashley with a hopeful smile, which Ashley returned, her face lighting up at the thought of finally leaving the basement, even if it was only temporary. As they reached the living room upstairs, it wasn't just Virginia who awaited them. A man unfamiliar to them was seated in one of the plush armchairs, his expression a mix of curiosity and sympathy. He looked to be in his late 40s, clean-shaven with neatly combed hair. He greeted them with a warm smile, his gaze soft as he shifted between Amber and Ashley. "Hello there," he said gently, his voice calm and reassuring. "My name is Mr. Spencer. I'm a friend of Virginia's." Amber felt a tiny spark of hope. This man appeared kinder, different from the usual people Virginia introduced to them. Maybe, she thought, he was here to help. Maybe he could sense the sadness they carried, the silent cries for help. Virginia gestured toward Mr. Spencer. "Mr. Spencer has graciously agreed to assist our family during these tough times. He might be able to offer you both a bit of guidance." There was an odd tone in her voice, something Amber couldn't quite decipher. But she clung to the hope, her heart beating faster with the thought of an escape, a possible ally in this dark time. Mr. Spencer leaned forward, observing them thoughtfully. Virginia mentioned that things have been hard for you girls. I'd like to help, however I can. Maybe I can arrange for you two to step outside every so often. Some fresh air might do you good." Ashley's eyes sparkled at the thought. She leaned over and whispered, "Amber, maybe we could go back to the park, like we used to." Her voice held a soft, innocent happiness, a flicker of joy in their otherwise shadowed world. Amber nodded, smiling despite herself. This man felt real, as if he truly cared. She could see it in the way he spoke to them, the way his gaze softened on Ashley. She let herself hope, just for a moment, that maybe he was the answer they'd been waiting for. Over the next few days, Mr. Spencer visited often, each time with small gifts in hand. He brought Amber a book and a fresh ribbon for Ashley's hair. He shared stories of his travels, describing breathtaking cities and peaceful forests. Amber watched as Ashley's face glowed with joy, her laughter filling the room, a sound she had almost forgotten. Mr. Spencer had become the single ray of happiness in their lives, a small light that kept them going through the darkness Virginia had cast over them. One afternoon, as Mr. Spencer gently helped Ashley fasten the ribbon he'd given her, Amber knew it was time to confide in him. She took a steadying breath, her heart pounding as she found him in the sitting room. "Mr. Spencer," she started softly, her voice wavering, Could you help us see our father? We haven't been allowed to visit him and we miss him terribly." Her words trembled, yet she looked up at him, her eyes full of pleading hope. He gazed down at her, his expression softening. "Of course, Amber," he replied. "I'll speak with Virginia. She needs to understand how essential it is for you girls to be with your father during this time." Amber's heart soared as he nodded, promising to do all he could. She watched him stride down the hall, his steps firm and echoing through the quiet house, bringing a glimmer of comfort that someone was finally on their side. But as time dragged on, minutes turning into hours, the sense of hope began to fade. When Mr. Spencer finally returned, Virginia stood beside him, wearing a smug smile that made Amber's stomach twist. She had never before seen Mr. Spencer's warm expression replace it with a cool, distant one. "I spoke with Virginia," he said, his voice now formal and devoid of warmth. "She believes it's best if you girls remain under her care. Your father is very unwell, you understand." Amber's heart plummeted, a mix of confusion and betrayal swirling in her chest. She stepped back, catching Ashley's wide-eyed, worried gaze. "But you promised to help us," Amber murmured, her voice barely holding steady. Mr. Spencer merely shrugged, a gesture that cut deeper than words. "Virginia and I have an understanding, Amber. You and Ashley must listen to her. It's for the best." Virginia's cold laugh filled the room, her hand resting possessively on Mr. Spencer's shoulder. "Thank you, Mr. Spencer, for your assistance," she said with mock sweetness, her gaze landing on Amber with a look of triumph. "Did you really think he'd help you? Foolish Amber." Amber's face flushed with a painful mix of shame and anger, her glimmer of hope crushed under Virginia's merciless grin. She had been so naive, so eager to believe that someone, anyone, would come to their rescue. The warmth, the kindness. It had all been a cruel act, a twisted charade for Virginia's entertainment. The hardest part was the look in Ashley's eyes, the brief confusion that melted into heartbreak. "But he promised to take us to the park," Ashley murmured, clutching her ribbon as if it held the last sliver of joy she possessed. Amber wrapped Ashley in her arms, running her fingers through her hair, trying to soothe her even as her own heart shattered. A powerful anger ignited within her, a fierce resolve that swept away the remnants of her innocence. She was done waiting for someone else to save them. She would protect Ashley, no matter the cost. Virginia observed them with a look of satisfaction, her lips twisting into a smug smile. Back to the basement. Looks like neither of you has learned your lesson, Virginia sneered, leading them down the stairs once more. Amber's stomach churned as the darkness closed in around them again. This time, the sting of betrayal was sharper, the silence more biting. Amber settled in the shadows, holding Ashley close as the walls of the basement seemed to press in tighter. Hours slipped by, the air thick with despair, but as she lay awake, anger simmered beneath her calm exterior. A quiet resolve began to harden inside her. She would trust no one who came at Virginia's bidding. She would find a way out for Ashley's sake, no matter what. Then, as the house grew still above them, Amber caught a new sound. It was faint, barely a whisper, but unmistakable. Her pulse quickened as she recognized it. It was her father's voice calling her name, weak but real. The sound, fragile and distant, stirred a hope within her that she thought had long faded. Amber strained to listen, desperate for any hint of his voice. "Amber, Ashley." His voice filtered softly through the thick walls. It was faint, but it was undeniably there. She shook Ashley awake, her heart racing. "Ashley, wake up! Papa's calling us," she whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. Ashley stirred, rubbing her eyes in the dim light. "Papa," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, filled with fragile hope. Together, they pressed their ears against the cold basement wall, clinging to each faint sound, every muffled syllable. Their father's voice was faint, yet it held a familiar warmth, a softness that reminded them of times when everything had felt safe and whole. But as they listened, his words grew even quieter, slowly slipping away into silence. Amber felt a deep pang of sorrow as it dawned on her that he was fading, just as distant as he had been for so many months. Suddenly, the basement door creaked open, and Virginia's shadow filled the doorway. Her face was tense with irritation. "What are you two doing awake?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the silence. Amber's pulse quickened, and she leaned toward Ashley, whispering urgently, "Don't say anything. Don't let her know." She looked up, trying to keep her expression calm, praying her fear wasn't visible. Virginia's eyes narrowed as if she sensed something hidden. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, her gaze cold and searching, lingering on their anxious faces. "I don't know what you think you're up to," Virginia sneered, "but I'm not putting up with this nonsense. Go to sleep, now." Amber felt a scream rise in her throat, a desperate urge to plead with Virginia, to let them see their father, to tell her they needed just one moment with him to know he was okay. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Virginia's heart was like ice. As Virginia's footsteps retreated and the basement door slammed shut, Amber turned to Ashley, her face set with determination. "Ashley, we have to find a way to him. We can't just stay here not knowing." Ashley clung to her, nodding, her small hands clutching Amber's tightly. "But how, Amber?" "Virginia won't let us." Amber's mind raced, feeling the basement walls pressing in, cold and unyielding. She felt trapped, desperate, but then her eyes landed on a small, dusty window in the far corner. It was narrow, just wide enough for Ashley, and led out to the garden. She eyed the window, her mind forming a plan. If she could lift Ashley high enough, maybe, just maybe, Ashley could squeeze through and get help. With a surge of hope, she turned to Ashley. "You're smaller than me. If I help you up, you might be able to get out through that window. Then you can head to the neighbors, or maybe even the police, Ashley." Her eyes widened, a mix of fear and excitement glimmering in them. "But Amber, what about you?" Amber forced herself to smile, trying to keep her voice calm. "Don't worry about me. Once you get help, they'll come for us both. But you need to be brave." Ashley nodded, her small fingers trembling as she gripped Amber's hand. They crept quietly to the window together. Amber lifted Ashley up, her muscles straining with the effort. The window was dusty and rigid, and it took all her strength to get it open. At last, it groaned and slid up. Ashley slipped through, her face pale but determined. She reached back, her fingers brushing Amber's as she whispered, "I'll come back for you, Amber. Promise?" Amber's heart swelled with pride and love as she watched her sister disappear into the dark garden. She sank to the floor, holding her breath, her hands trembling slightly. The seconds dragged on like hours as she waited, straining to hear any sign that Ashley had made it out safely. Then came the sound of footsteps above. Virginia's heavy, purposeful steps. Amber's heart froze, dread washing over her as she realized Virginia must have noticed Ashley was gone. Moments later, the basement door swung open and Virginia stormed down, fury etched on her face. Her gaze darted to the open window, then zeroed in on Amber, eyes blazing. "Where is she?" Virginia's voice was a low, dangerous hiss. Where did she go? Amber felt her throat dry, but she raised her chin defiantly. "She's gone to get help. She'll bring someone back, and they'll put an end to this." Virginia's face twisted with anger as she stepped forward, grabbing Amber's arm with a fierce grip. "You foolish child," she spat. "Do you think anyone's going to believe the tales of two little girls? They'll think you're making it all up. And if you believe I'll let either of you ruin everything I've worked for, you're sorely mistaken." Amber's heart pounded with fear, but she forced herself to look Virginia in the eye. "We'll escape from you," she whispered, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "Ashley will get help, and we'll be free." Virginia's eyes flared. With a cruel smirk, Virginia shoved Amber against the frigid basement wall. "You're going to regret this, Amber," she sneered. "And as for your sister, don't worry. I'll find her too. When I do, she'll pay for trying to escape." Amber's blood ran cold as Virginia stormed out, her footsteps echoing ominously through the house as she began her search. Amber felt helpless, trapped in the damp, shadowed basement, fear gnawing at her for Ashley's safety. She could only hope her sister had made it far enough away, somewhere Virginia's reach couldn't extend. Time crawled as Amber sat alone, darkness pressing in with a suffocating weight. Every passing moment seemed heavier, amplifying the emptiness left by their mother's absence. The silence was oppressive, filling her with helplessness and a fear that grew more unbearable by the minute. Then, suddenly, she caught a faint sound from above. It was barely audible at first, but as voices murmured, it grew louder. Amber's heart leapt with cautious hope, straining to catch the words. Could it be? Had Ashley managed to find someone who could help? Yet, as the voices drew nearer, that flicker of hope turned to dread. One of the voices was unmistakable. It was Virginia, her tone sharp and icy, speaking to someone else. Amber couldn't make out the words, but the sound sent a shiver through her. Then came another voice, soft and shaky. Amber's heart twisted as she recognized it. Ashley's voice, trembling and hesitant, answering Virginia's questions. A heavy despair sank into her as she realized the terrible T-Brenda. Virginia had found her. All of Ashley's courage and her efforts to seek help had been in vain. Now, they were both trapped, alone in this dark place, with no one to save them. The basement door creaked open, and Virginia appeared, holding Ashley by the arm. Ashley's face was pale, streaked with tears, her eyes meeting Amber's with a look that broke her heart, a look of defeat, of surrender, as if hope had drained from her entirely. Virginia's smile was triumphant and icy as she shoved Ashley back into the basement, locking them in. She watched them, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes, her voice a soft, mocking murmur. "I warned you, Amber," she said, her words dripping with venom. "You belong to me now, both of you. No one's coming to save you." She turned sharply, the door slamming shut behind her, the sound of the lock echoing like a final blow. Amber slumped to the floor beside Ashley, pulling her sister close as they sat in silence. She held her tightly, feeling the crushing weight of defeat and despair wrap around them both. They had tried everything, grasping at every shred of hope, only to watch it slip away. As the quiet settled around them, Amber felt a steely resolve start to build inside her. If they were going to escape, it would be up to them alone. She leaned close to Ashley and whispered, her voice calm and unwavering, "We'll find a way, Ashley. I don't know how, but we'll make it out. Whatever it takes." Yet, even as she said the words, a chilling T-Brenda settled in her mind. There was no one left to turn to, no one who cared enough to intervene. They were truly, completely alone. And as they sat together in the dark, Amber felt a shiver run through her, wondering if they'd ever see the light of day again. The days that followed blurred together into a quiet, shadow-filled existence. Amber and Ashley clung to each other in the damp, cold basement, each passing moment pressing down, heavier than the last. Every creak from above, the refrigerator's low hum, the sound of Virginia's footsteps, served as a harsh reminder of the prison that had become their world. But Amber held on to one thought: escape. Somehow, they would break free. One afternoon, just as the weight of hopelessness started to press too hard, the basement door creaked open. Amber's heart jumped as she saw Virginia descending the stairs. Yet something was different in Virginia's demeanor. There was an unsettling calm in her gaze, one that set Amber on edge. "Get up, girls," Virginia said coolly, folding her arms. "I have an opportunity for you." Amber tensed, her eyes narrowing. Virginia rarely offered anything without some hidden catch. Still, she couldn't ignore the faint glimmer of hope sparking within her. Rising slowly, she took Ashley's hand as they stepped toward Virginia. Virginia's eyes scanned over them, calculating and cold. "I'm giving you a chance to earn my trust," Virginia declared, her gaze steady. "If you show me you're responsible, maybe I'll let you out of the basement and let you work upstairs." Amber's heart skipped a beat. The words sounded almost unreal. For a fleeting, dizzying second, she pictured herself outside that stifling room, feeling sunlight on her face, breathing air that wasn't damp or stale. She looked at Ashley, whose eyes shone with the same fragile hope. It was the first time in ages they dared to imagine life beyond the basement walls. Virginia's lips curled into a slight knowing smile, as though she enjoyed watching them cling to hope she could easily take away. "But remember," she continued, her voice razor-sharp, "this is a privilege you have to earn. You'll do whatever I tell you, chores, errands, whatever. And one misstep, one act of disobedience, and it's straight back to the basement." Amber's jaw clenched as she swallowed hard. She didn't trust Virginia, not even a little. But there were no other choices. The basement was crushing them. Any chance to escape it, they had to take. Nodding almost imperceptibly, Amber whispered, "We'll do it. Whatever you ask." Virginia's eyebrow arched slightly, her smirk widening. "Good," she replied flatly, turning and motioning for them to follow. "Then let's get started." As they stepped out of the basement, Amber felt her pulse quicken at the soft brush of sunlight through the dusty windows. The air seemed clearer and lighter compared to the heavy, musty air below. Ashley squeezed her hand tightly, and Amber gave her a small, reassuring smile in return. Virginia led them into the kitchen, gesturing curtly at a pile of dirty dishes overflowing in the sink. "Start with those," she ordered, her voice cold, "and make sure they're spotless. I'll be watching." Amber and Ashley exchanged a quick, determined glance before setting to work. Their hands moved swiftly, and each dish was scrubbed carefully. For the first time, in what felt like an eternity, Amber sensed a small spark of control, however faint. Even this simple chore filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. She'd do whatever it took to earn even a glimpse of freedom for herself and Ashley, and as the days slipped by, they settled into the strange, cautious rhythm of their new routine. Virginia gave them a list of chores: scrubbing floors, dusting shelves, sorting laundry, and they carried each one out quietly, without a word. But Amber soon began to realize that Virginia seemed to relish criticizing their efforts. The tiniest smudge on a plate or a stray dust particle was enough to send Virginia into a silent rage. Her icy stare alone could freeze Amber in place. "Do it again," Virginia would say, her tone as cold as stone, making them redo each task until their hands were sore and their spirits nearly crushed. Yet Amber held firm, refusing to give Virginia the satisfaction of seeing her waver. She kept her head up, her actions steady and intentional, clinging fiercely to a spark of hope. One evening, as they were polishing windows, a visitor showed up. Amber barely dared to look his way, but out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a tall man with salt and pepper hair, dressed impeccably in a fine suit, carrying himself with an air of confidence. Virginia greeted him with a sickly sweet smile, her tone warm, something Amber had never heard before. "Hello, Mr. Benson," she cooed. "Thanks for stopping by. I have those items we talked about right in the parlor." Amber's curiosity stirred. She hadn't seen Mr. Benson before, yet something about his presence unsettled her. As he and Virginia disappeared into the parlor, she couldn't help but strain to catch snippets of their conversation. Through the half-open door, she caught Mr. Benson's low, serious voice. "So, these items, they're family heirlooms, right?" Virginia's voice was smooth, almost scripted. "Yes, from my late husband's family. There were quite a few valuable pieces, but with no one left to pass them on to, I thought I might sell a few to cover some expenses." Amber's heart raced as she realized Virginia's scheme. She was selling off their family's precious heirlooms, items that had belonged to their mother, filled with memories and meaning. Anger simmered within her, but she kept silent, watching as Virginia guided Mr. Benson around, showing him piece after piece, a greedy gleam in her eye. In that moment, Amber knew she couldn't stand by and let this continue. Amber knew she had to preserve what little remained of her family's heritage, but the risk was suffocating. Every effort to resist meant risking another trip to the basement. She clenched the counter, her knuckles turning white with a mix of anger and helplessness. When Mr. Benson finally departed, Virginia sauntered back into the kitchen, her cold gaze landing on Amber with a smug smile. "Is something bothering you, Amber?" Her tone dripped with mockery. Amber bit her lip, forcing herself to stay quiet, but Virginia leaned in, her voice dropping to a taunting whisper. "Did you honestly think this bit of freedom was for you?" she sneered. "No, sweetheart. You're just here to clean up my mess." Amber's heart sank as the cruel reality hit her. Virginia's so-called kindness was just another manipulation, another way to maintain control. Later that night, after Virginia had gone to bed, Amber sat with her younger sister Ashley in their tiny, cramped room, a converted storage closet that they were now allowed to use. She looked at Ashley's face, reading the confusion and disappointment in her sister's eyes. "Amber, will we ever be free?" Ashley's voice was soft, but her question cut deep. Amber took a shaky breath, gathering strength she didn't feel. "I don't know, Ashley," she whispered, wrapping an arm around her sister. "But we have to keep trying. Somehow, we'll find a way." Yet as the days dragged on, Amber felt hope slipping away. Each task, each degrading order from Virginia, drained her, wearing down her spirit. Their small tastes of freedom had soured under Virginia's relentless control. One evening, as they scrubbed the floors again, Amber caught Virginia's voice on the phone, low and calculated. "Yes, Mr. Benson." "I've sold off a few more things," Virginia murmured. "The girls?" "Oh, they're still around, but don't worry. They're not a problem." Her cold, bitter laugh followed. "Once I'm done, there won't be anything left for them. I'll make sure of that." Amber felt a chill run through her, confirming the fear she'd had all along. The reality was finally hitting hard. Virginia had been slowly tearing their family apart, leaving them with nothing but a hollow shell of what they once knew. It was a carefully orchestrated scheme, and they had been mere pieces in Virginia's twisted game. That night, Amber lay in their cramped little room, eyes fixed on the ceiling, as a quiet determination started to grow within her. She realized she couldn't wait for a miracle. Virginia wasn't going to release them. She would never allow them the chance at a real life outside those walls. Leaning close, she whispered softly to her sister Ashley, who stirred beside her. "Ashley, listen to me. We're getting out of here. I don't know how yet, but we'll find a way." Ashley's eyes widened, a blend of fear and hope shining through. "But Amber, what if she catches us?" Amber gripped her sister's hand tightly. "We'll be careful. We have to. We deserve a real life, a safe life." As the first light of morning crept through the small window, Amber made a vow to herself. No matter how long it took, no matter the obstacles, she would find a way to break free from Virginia's control. They would leave behind this house, a prison of lies and cruelty, and seek a place where they could finally feel safe. Yet, as she drifted into a fitful sleep, a dreadful thought lingered. Virginia's hold was strong, her influence deep-rooted, and Amber couldn't help but wonder if escaping would be as simple as she hoped. Amber clung to the plan of escape, the single fragile hope she held on to amid the relentless tasks and punishments Virginia subjected them to. Each night, she lay awake, whispering to Ashley about the life they would create for themselves. One filled with laughter, light streaming through big windows, and a home where they could rediscover the love they'd lost. But deep down, she knew they couldn't do it alone. Then, one cloudy afternoon, something unexpected happened. Amber was in the dining room, polishing the silverware under Virginia's watchful eye, when a voice from the doorway caught her attention. It was a voice that stirred memories of better times. "Amber, is that really you?" Her heart leaped as she turned around to see a face she hadn't seen in what felt like forever. Grace, her mother's childhood friend, was lovingly known by Amber and Ashley as Aunt Grace. She had been a comforting, familiar figure in their lives, filling their home with warmth and a laugh that could light up any space. But after their mother passed away, Grace became a distant memory, slipping away like so many others in their lives. Amber fought to keep her composure, her hands shaking with a mix of hope and fear. "Aunt Grace," she whispered, her voice cracking. Grace stepped closer, studying Amber and Ashley with a deep, worried look. Her face softened as she noticed their weary expressions and the ill-fitting clothes draped over their frail frames. Grace glanced back at Virginia, her eyes clouded with suspicion and concern. "Virginia, I didn't know the girls were staying with you. I assumed they'd be with their father," she said, her tone tinged with uncertainty. Virginia forced a smile. "Of course, Grace. With Billy ill, it's up to me to look after them. They're just getting used to the household rules, that's all. Amber, Ashley, shouldn't you be busy with your chores?" But Amber couldn't hold back any longer. She looked up at Grace, her eyes pleading. "Aunt Grace, please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We need help. Virginia keeps us locked in the basement. We're not allowed to see Papa and she's selling all of Mama's belongings. We need someone to help us." Virginia's face hardened as she sent Amber a warning glare, but Grace didn't hesitate. She gently pulled Amber close, her gaze shifting from Virginia to the frightened faces of the girls, piecing together the grim reality. "Virginia," Grace said, her voice now sharp with suspicion. "Why are these girls in such poor shape? And what's this about them not seeing their father?" Amber shivered as Virginia's forced smile vanished and a steely coldness took its place. "Grace, I'm doing what I can under tough circumstances. Billy has been ill for months. It's been difficult for all of us. The girls need discipline, and I've had to be strict with them." Grace's eyes narrowed. "Discipline? They look half-starved, Virginia. And they're scared of you. I can see it." Virginia's face twisted in anger, but she managed to pull herself together, her voice dropping to a chilling, sharp tone. "Grace, I'd advise you to stay out of this. These girls are my responsibility, not yours." But Grace wasn't intimidated. She gently rested a reassuring hand on Amber's shoulder, looking directly into her eyes with a kindness Amber hadn't felt in so long. "Don't worry," Amber said softly. "I'll make sure you're safe." Then, turning to Virginia with a resolute stare, she added, "I'll be back tomorrow, and I'll speak with Billy personally. This situation isn't right." For the first time in weeks, Amber felt a flicker of real hope. Aunt Grace would return, and she would help them. She was certain of it. That evening, Virginia's fury knew no bounds. She sent the girls back down to the basement, her face hard with fury. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" she sneered. "Running to Grace? Let me be clear. You and Ashley are going nowhere, and if Grace tries to interfere, I'll make sure she regrets it." Amber shivered as Virginia slammed the door shut, the lock clicking firmly. But despite the darkness and cold of the basement, Amber held on to Grace's promise tightly. She whispered to Ashley, "Aunt Grace is coming back. She said she'd talk to Dad. She'll make Virginia stop." Ashley's eyes shone with cautious hope. "Do you really think she'll help us, Amber? Do you think we'll finally be free?" Amber hugged her sister close. "Yes, Ashley. Aunt Grace will make things right. We just need to hold on a little longer." The next day, Amber listened intently, straining to catch any sound of Grace's arrival. Every footstep brought a rush of anticipation as she waited, hoping that Grace would come through for them. By late afternoon, she heard voices upstairs, Virginia's harsh tone mixed with Aunt Grace's warm voice. Her heart leapt as she heard footsteps approaching the basement door. She listened to the rattle of keys and the slow turning of the lock. But as the door opened, Amber's relief quickly faded. Grace stood in the doorway, her expression distant and almost unreadable, no longer soft or reassuring. She looked at them with a strange, uncomfortable glance, avoiding their eyes. Behind her, Virginia smirked with satisfaction. "See, Amber? Aunt Grace understands now." Amber glanced at Grace, feeling her last bit of hope slip away. She had trusted Aunt Grace and believed she would stand up for them. But Grace cleared her throat and shifted, visibly uncomfortable under Virginia's cold gaze. "Amber, Ashley, I spoke with Virginia. She believes it's best for you to stay here, where she can take care of you," Grace said, her voice hesitant. The words pierced Amber's heart. She looked at Grace, expecting strength, but saw only hesitation and fear. "But you promised," Amber whispered, her voice cracking. "You said you'd protect us." A flicker of regret crossed Grace's face, but as Virginia's stare grew harsher, it quickly faded. Grace took a step back, unwilling to confront the reality of her own words. "I'm sorry, Amber," she murmured. "I wish it were different. But Virginia is your stepmother, and she has the final say." Amber felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her. Grace had been their last link to the warmth and safety of their mother, and now she too had left them just like everyone else. Virginia smirked as she led Grace up the stairs, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "See, Amber? No one's coming to rescue you. Not Grace. Not anyone," she sneered. The door slammed shut, and the lock clicked, sealing their fate. Amber and Ashley sat together in the heavy silence that followed, all hope shattered. Amber held Ashley close, stroking her hair as silent tears fell. She had assured Ashley that Aunt Grace would help, promising that they'd find a way out, and that there was a better life waiting for them somewhere beyond these walls. But it was clear now. There would be no rescue. They were completely and utterly alone. Ashley's voice broke the quiet, soft and trembling. "Amber, does anyone love us anymore?" The question ached in Amber's heart, and she struggled to respond without letting her despair show. "Of course they do, Ashley. Mama loved us. Papa loves us too. He just doesn't know what's happening." Ashley nodded, sniffling, but Amber saw doubt beginning to cloud her sister's eyes. She couldn't stand the thought of Ashley losing hope, even as she felt her own slipping away. Yet, she was completely drained of strength to deceive. In the darkness, they clung tightly to one another, as if their bond could protect them from the harshness of the world outside. Amber's thoughts raced wildly, ideas colliding as she sought a new strategy. But every thought seemed more unattainable than the last. Every avenue appeared obstructed, every opportunity for escape slipping further from reach. Just as they began to succumb to restless slumber, Amber heard it once more. A soft voice, calling her name. She shot up, her heart pounding. It was faint, nearly drowned out by the walls surrounding them. But there was no mistaking it. Her father's voice, weak and far away, reaching out to her. "Amber? Ashley?" Amber's breath hitched as it dawned on her that he was still there, reaching out in the shadows, perhaps just as ensnared as they were. In that moment, a renewed sense of determination surged within her. No matter what it took, she would find him. She would uncover a way to rescue herself, to save Ashley, and to liberate her father from Virginia's cruel grip. However, as she settled back down, she couldn't shake the fear that clawed at her heart. How much longer could any of them endure in this house, filled with shadows and deceit? The weeks that followed were a haze of hopelessness and resolve. Grace's betrayal had left a painful mark, but Amber pushed through, determined to focus for Ashley's sake. Each day brought fresh punishments, new chores, and hours spent locked away in the basement. Yet Amber's mind remained relentless, plotting and searching for a means to break free from Virginia's hold. One frosty morning, as she and Ashley scrubbed the kitchen floors under Virginia's watchful gaze, Amber overheard something that sent chills down her spine. Virginia was on the phone in the next room, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Yes, the papers will be ready by the end of the month. Once Billy's assets are officially transferred, I'll have everything," Virginia said, her tone dripping with triumph. "The girls? Don't worry about them. They'll be taken care of in due time." Amber's heart raced as a cold realization settled over her. Virginia was plotting to seize control of everything their father owned, and once she had it, there would be no reason to keep them around. The seriousness of their predicament became all too evident. They needed to get away, and they needed to do it quickly. That evening, as they lay in their cramped quarters, Amber shared her thoughts with Ashley. "Ashley, we can't delay any longer," she murmured, her voice steady with resolve. "We have to figure out a way to escape. If we don't, Virginia will," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. but the look in Ashley's wide eyes showed she grasped the underlying fear. "But how, Amber?" Ashley asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's always watching us." Amber inhaled deeply, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to be clever. Virginia's scheming something significant, which means she'll be preoccupied. We just need to bide our time and make a break for it. We can go to the police or find someone who can assist us." That night, long after Ashley had drifted off to sleep, Amber remained wide awake, replaying every potential escape plan in her mind. The house felt like a stronghold. Each door was locked tight, and every window was high and fortified. But then she remembered one escape route she hadn't thought about in a while: the basement window. It was small, yet it could be their only chance. The following day, Virginia left the house for the afternoon, locking them in the basement, a rare occurrence for her to leave them unsupervised. Amber seized this moment as a sign that they might finally have their chance. She glanced over at the window, her heart racing as she assessed it with her eyes. It was narrow and partly rusted shut, but if she could manage to loosen it, Ashley might be able to slip through and find help. She would follow after, even if it meant scraping her arms and legs in the process. Amber approached the window, pulling at it with all her might. The frame resisted her efforts, refusing to budge. Yet she persisted, her fingers raw and aching. At last, it creaked open, just enough to create a small gap for them to escape. Amber's heart soared with hope. Turning to Ashley, she spoke with determination. "Ashley, you go first. I'll be right behind you." Ashley nodded, her face pale but firm. She climbed up, wriggling her small frame through the opening. Amber held her breath, aiding Ashley as she pushed through. Soon, Ashley's feet vanished from view, and Amber heard her land softly outside. "It worked, Amber." Ashley's voice came through, barely above a whisper, filled with excitement from the other side. "Come on," Amber urged herself to hurry. Her heart raced as she squeezed her body through the narrow opening. Her shoulders scraped painfully against the rusted edges, but she pressed on, ignoring the sharp sting. Freedom was so close. She could feel the cool night air brushing against her face as she wriggled further. But just as she reached the halfway mark, the sound she feared most shattered the silence. The low rumble of Virginia's car rolling into the driveway made Amber freeze, her heart racing at the sound of familiar footsteps approaching. Virginia's heels clicked sharply against the concrete as she approached the side of the house. Amber and Ashley exchanged a glance full of terror as Virginia's shadow loomed over the window. Virginia halted, her heels scraping the gravel as she looked down at Amber, who was caught halfway through the window, paralyzed with fear. Virginia's face contorted with rage as she reached down, seizing Amber's wrist with an iron grip and yanking her back inside with a force that left Amber dizzy. "No, no," Amber cried out, reaching desperately for Ashley, now standing outside with a face pale from fear. "Amber!" Ashley's voice trembled as she extended her hand toward her sister, tears streaming down her cheeks. But Virginia pulled Amber inside with a brutal final tug, slamming the window shut with one hand while maintaining her iron hold on Amber's arm. She dragged her back into the basement, fury etched across her features. Virginia's face radiated pure, chilling anger as she locked the window, severing any chance of escape. "You thought you could escape me." Virginia's voice was a low, menacing growl as she shoved Amber against the cold basement wall. "I warned you, Amber. I told you not to defy me." Amber could only watch helplessly as Virginia turned her attention to Ashley, who pounded on the glass with small fists. "Don't touch her," Amber screamed, struggling against Virginia's grip. "Please leave her alone." Virginia's eyes flashed with terrifying determination. "Oh, don't worry. I'll deal with her next." With a twisted smile, Virginia stormed back upstairs, slamming the basement door shut and trapping Amber inside. Her heart raced as she heard the locks click into place. She could still hear Ashley's panicked voice coming from outside, muffled and filled with urgency as she pounded on the basement window. "Amber, Amber, are you okay?" Amber pressed her hands against the glass, peering into her sister's tear-stained face. "Ashley, you need to go," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Run to the neighbors. Get help. Don't worry about me. Just go." Ashley shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't leave you, Amber. I don't want to be alone." "Ashley, please," Amber pleaded, desperation tightening her throat. "If you don't leave, Virginia will." Amber couldn't finish the thought. It was too horrifying to articulate. Ashley hesitated, her small face contorted with anguish and fear. But eventually, she nodded. She pressed her hand against the window one last time before turning and fleeing into the dark beyond the basement window. Amber slumped against the wall, her heart shattered. Exhaustion and despair coursed through her body, shaking her to the core. Now, she was utterly alone, trapped in the basement, with no escape. Virginia had taken everything from her: her mother's memory, her father's affection, her freedom, and now, even her sister. She sat in silence, listening to Virginia's footsteps thudding above, a harsh reminder of the prison she couldn't break free from. Hours dragged on, the darkness closing in around her until she felt like she was suffocating. But then, in the stillness of the night, Amber heard a faint sound, something that made her heart race. A knock. A soft, hesitant knock on the basement window. Amber's breath hitched as she rushed to the window, her eyes wide with disbelief. She pressed her face against the glass, her heart pounding as she peered out into the shadows. There, on the other side of the window, was Ashley. Amber gazed at Ashley's tear-streaked face, her heart racing with a mix of relief and fear. She had urged Ashley to run and find help. Yet here she was again, hands pressed against the glass, her face pale and frightened. "Ashley," Amber whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Why did you come back? You need to get away from here. It's not safe." Ashley shook her head vigorously, her youthful determination shining through. "I can't leave you, Amber. I don't know where to go, and being on my own terrifies me." Amber's heart ached as she reached out, pressing her palm against the window. She longed to pull Ashley through the glass, to hold her tight and never let go, but she was acutely aware that Virginia would return at any moment. If Virginia discovered Ashley's presence, the consequences would be dire. "Ashley, you need to hear me out. You have to run. Get as far away from here as possible," Amber urged, her voice quaking with desperation. "Go to a neighbor's house, find someone, anyone, and tell them everything. You can't stay here." Just then, the door to the basement creaked open, and Amber's stomach dropped as Virginia's silhouette loomed in the doorway. Amber turned slowly, her body instinctively shielding Ashley from view as Virginia's frigid, calculating eyes locked onto her. "Well, well," Virginia sneered, her lips twisting into a malicious grin. "What a heartfelt little reunion." Amber stepped back, positioning herself protectively in front of Ashley as Virginia descended the stairs with deliberate slowness. She could sense Ashley's fearful gaze on her back, but she couldn't risk turning around. She wouldn't give Virginia the satisfaction of knowing how deeply she cared for Ashley's safety. That would only grant Virginia more leverage. As she drew nearer, Virginia's voice dripped with scorn. "Did you really think you could get away from me, Amber? That I wouldn't see through your pathetic little scheme. Amber clenched her teeth, her fists tight at her sides. You can't keep us here forever, she shot back, her tone fierce. Someone will discover the Brenda. Ashley will get help, and you'll be unmasked for the monster you are. Virginia only chuckled, a chilling, heartless sound that bounced off the basement walls. Oh, Amber, she said, her voice saturated with venom. No one is coming to rescue you. Haven't you figured that out yet? Amber's blood ran cold as she recognized the confidence in Virginia's eyes, the glint of triumph that sparkled there. Virginia had severed all their ties and isolated them completely, stripping them of every connection and hope. But now, a new, deeper kind of cruelty flashed across her face, a satisfaction that transcended her usual torment. Virginia moved in closer, her eyes piercing. You think you have it all figured out, don't you? But you're clueless about what's really going on. She paused, studying Amber's reaction, savoring the fear that flickered across her face. I've been plotting this for years, Amber. I knew that someday your father would be vulnerable, that he would rely on me to care for him, and for you too. Now, everything is falling into place. Amber's heart raced as the realization began to dawn on her. Virginia's cold demeanor, her manipulative ways, and her sudden intrusion into their lives had all been part of a larger scheme. Why? Amber whispered, her voice trembling. Why do you despise us so much? What have we done to deserve this? Virginia's expression hardened. Because I never wanted you. Any of you, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom and years of pent-up resentment. Your father and I were meant to build a life together, but then he brought you and Ashley into the picture. I was left with two little burdens I never asked for. The revelation hit Amber like a physical blow, but Virginia continued her tirade. Your father has always been weak, she spat, her voice thick with disdain. He's been far too easy to manipulate, too lost in his own grief to recognize the Brenda right in front of him. I've made sure he'll never remember you the way you wish he would. Amber's heart twisted with a mix of rage and despair. Tears threatened to spill over, but she fought to keep them at bay, refusing to grant Virginia the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. But Virginia only grinned, her eyes gleaming with malicious delight. Soon, Amber, everything that belonged to your family, everything your father built, will be mine. And as for you and Ashley, let's just say you won't be an issue for much longer. Amber's heart raced, fear mingling with an intense, unyielding fury. She realized then that Virginia had no plans to let them go. This was more than just a cruel act of punishment. It was a calculated effort to erase them completely, to wipe them out of their own lives as if they had never existed. But she wasn't about to let that happen. Turning toward the window, she pressed her hand against the glass, her voice steady yet low as she locked eyes with Ashley. Run, Ashley. Now. Ashley hesitated, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She nodded, her small frame quaking as she stepped away from the window and faded into the night. A wave of relief washed over Amber, but it was fleeting. She understood that Virginia wouldn't let her slip away so easily. Virginia's gaze sharpened as she observed Ashley's retreat. Do you think she can really escape? She scoffed, striding toward the door. I'll hunt her down, Amber, and when I do, I'll ensure that neither of you sees the light of day again. Amber's heart plummeted as Virginia ascended the stairs, the door slamming shut behind her. Alone now, she felt trapped in the basement. Yet surrender was not an option. Not now. Ashley was still out there somewhere, lost in the shadows. It was her responsibility to find a way to shield her sister. She began pacing the basement, her thoughts racing. Time was of the essence. Virginia was relentless, and there was no telling the lengths she'd go to if she caught Ashley again. Amber's hands shook as she examined the walls and corners, desperate for an escape route. All she found was the cold, unyielding stone. Then, in the stillness, she detected something. A faint, muffled sound from above. Pressing her ear against the wall, her heart raced as she strained to catch the words. It was her father's voice, weak and slurred, as if he were battling to be heard. "Amber, Ashley." The sound ignited a flicker of hope, mingled with fear. He was still alive, still calling out for them, but he was also trapped, confined to his room under Virginia's control. Taking a shaky breath, Amber's thoughts turned to Ashley, alone and frightened in the darkness, fleeing from a threat she couldn't fully grasp. The weight of despair pressed down on her, but she refused to be overwhelmed. She stood tall, her fists clenched as she gazed up at the ceiling. Her heart ignited with fierce determination. This was her last shot, her final strategy. If Virginia sought to take everything from her, Amber would ensure she faced the consequences. She would escape the basement, thwart Virginia's plans, and rescue both her father and Ashley from her clutches. No matter the cost, she was ready to fight back. With that burning resolve propelling her, Amber stood up, prepared to confront whatever lay ahead. The night loomed heavily, shrouded in silence, as Amber found herself alone in the basement. Her thoughts raced with plans, while fear quickened her heartbeat. She felt trapped, yet she understood that surrendering wasn't an option. Somewhere out in that vast darkness was Ashley, lost and fleeing from a woman intent on their destruction. As hours dragged on, each one felt more burdensome than the last. Amber struggled to maintain her focus, trying to stay composed. But weariness gnawed at her, threatening to pull her under. Slumping against the cold stone wall, she sensed her strength waning. Then, just as the first rays of dawn began to filter through the narrow basement window, she heard it. A faint, familiar tapping. Sitting up, her pulse raced as she listened intently. At first, she dismissed it as the creaks of the aging house settling. But the rhythm was unmistakable. Tap, 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 tap. A pattern, a signal. She hurried to the window, her heart racing with hope. Ashley's face materialized on the other side. Her eyes were red from crying, yet filled with determination. Amber pressed her hand against the glass, relief washing over her. Ashley had returned, and somehow she had outsmarted Virginia. "Amber," Ashley whispered, her voice barely audible through the pain. "I found something important, but I can't make sense of it. You need to see it." Amber's heart leaped. "Ashley, where? What did you find?" Ashley glanced around anxiously before leaning closer to the glass. "I went back to Mom's things in the attic. I know you told me not to, but I had to. I found a letter. I think it's from Mom, but it's odd, Amber. It's like she knew what was going to happen." Amber's mind whirled. A letter from their mother. She couldn't recall ever seeing one, but the thought that their mother might have left something behind ignited a fierce hope within her. "Can you show me?" she whispered, eager for more details. Ashley nodded, casting a wary glance over her shoulder. "I think Virginia is still asleep. I hid the letter in the crawl space by the old wardrobe in the attic. If you can get out, we can read it together." Determination surged within Amber. She didn't know how she would escape the basement, but she was resolved to find that letter. Their mother had always been a gentle, wise woman, and if she had left a message for them, Amber believed it would hold the key to unraveling the darkness that had enveloped their lives. As soon as Ashley's face vanished from the window, Amber sprang into action. She examined the walls and tugged at the window frame, looking for anything that could help her escape. The basement had always felt like a prison, with each corner feeling harsh and unyielding. Yet desperation fueled her resolve. Finally, in a dimly lit corner, she spotted a rusty pipe that seemed loose. With all her strength, she pulled at it, feeling it budge slightly with every tug, until it finally broke free, leaving a narrow opening just wide enough for her hand to fit through. She stretched her arm as far as possible, her fingers grazing the lock on the other side of the door. With a final effort, she managed to turn it, hearing a soft click as the lock disengaged. Holding her breath, she crept up the stairs, hoping against hope that Virginia was still asleep. Once at the top, she paused, her breath caught in her throat as she strained to hear any sounds. The house was eerily quiet, enveloped in a stillness that felt unsettling. Amber moved quickly, but with caution, her heart racing as she headed toward the attic where Ashley was waiting. When she arrived, she found Ashley crouched beside the wardrobe, her small hands clutching a crumpled piece of paper. Amber knelt next to her, and Ashley eagerly handed over the letter, her eyes shining with anticipation. Amber unfolded the fragile paper, her hands trembling as she recognized her mother's familiar handwriting. "Dearest Amber and Ashley," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means I am no longer with you. But know that my love for both of you is everlasting." She paused, her breath hitching as she continued to read. Her mother's words spun a tale she had never heard before. She described Virginia's jealousy, the way she resented the love their father had for his family, and how Virginia had repeatedly tried to undermine their happiness. Their mother sensed that something was wrong, but had no idea of the full extent of Virginia's malice. "I fear that Virginia will stop at nothing to take what she believes is hers," the letter went on. "But my dear girls, you are stronger than she could ever be. Don't let her crush your spirits. There is a key hidden beneath the old stone in the cellar floor. It opens a lockbox where I have left important documents, proof that will safeguard you. Rely on no one but each other. And always remember, you're never truly alone." Tears streamed down Amber's cheeks as she absorbed the final lines. Somehow, their mother had sensed the impending danger they faced. She had provided them with a way out, a final gesture of love to protect them from the shadows that had overtaken their lives. Ashley's voice was scarcely audible. "Amber, what does it mean? What papers?" Amber embraced her sister tightly, her heart heavy with grief, yet burning with determination. "Mum left us proof, Ashley. Proof that Virginia has no claim to our family home, no right to keep us trapped here. We just need to find that key in the basement, and then we can put a stop to her." The relief that washed over Ashley was unmistakable, a flicker of hope amidst their turmoil. But just as they were about to speak again, footsteps echoed ominously from the stairs. Amber's heart raced as she spotted Virginia's silhouette creeping down the hallway. "Quick, hide!" Amber hissed, stuffing the letter into her pocket and pulling Ashley into the cramped space behind the wardrobe. They crouched together, breathless, as Virginia entered the attic. Her eyes scanned the room, filled with suspicion. "I know you're up here, Amber," Virginia taunted, her voice dripping with malice. "You think you're so clever, snooping around, searching for things that don't belong to you." Amber felt Ashley tremble beside her, and she held her sister tighter, praying that Virginia wouldn't discover them. The attic was shrouded in shadows, and they remained perfectly still as Virginia moved through the room, her steps heavy and calculated. After what seemed like an eternity, Virginia huffed in frustration and exited, slamming the door behind her. Amber released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, a wave of relief washing over her as she retrieved the letter from her pocket. Her mother's words imbued her with newfound strength. "We have to get to the cellar," Amber whispered. We'll find the key, and with those papers, we can finally put an end to her." Ashley nodded, her complexion pale yet determined. Together, they descended the stairs, treading lightly until they reached the cellar door. Amber's heart raced as she opened it, the darkness below inviting them forward. The basement was chilly and moist, the rough stone floor pressed against their feet as they searched for the loose rock their mother had mentioned. They felt their way along the ground. Ashley paused, her eyes sparkling with discovery. "Here. It's loose." Amber knelt down beside her, summoning all her strength to lift the heavy stone. Hidden underneath was a small, tarnished key, its surface cool and worn. Clutching it tightly, a fierce determination ignited within her as she thought about their mother and the sacrifices she had made to keep them safe. They made their way back up to the house and slipped into the study, where their father had spent many evenings. Amber recalled the hidden compartment on the bookshelf, a secret place her father had revealed to her long ago, known only to their family. She inserted the key into the lock and turned it, hearing a soft click as the compartment opened. Inside was a neatly bound stack of papers. Amber's heart raced as she quickly scanned the documents. They were her father's will, legal papers that clearly named her and Ashley as the rightful heirs to their home and everything else he possessed. Virginia's name was nowhere to be found. A powerful sense of triumph surged through Amber. She had the evidence they needed, the final piece that could thwart Virginia's plans. But before she could say anything, the study door burst open, revealing Virginia, her face twisted in fury. Seeing the papers in Amber's hands made Virginia's eyes blaze with a hatred that sent a shiver down Amber's spine. "You little brat," Virginia hissed, her voice low and threatening. "You think a few scraps of paper will save you? This house, everything in it, it's mine." Amber squared her shoulders, her voice unwavering. "It was never yours, Virginia. Now everyone will know the tea, Brenda." Virginia lunged forward with her hands outstretched, but Amber resisted because of the strength of her mother's love. As Virginia's rage filled the room, Amber realized they were no longer powerless. They had the evidence, the two Brenda, and each other. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they were prepared. Virginia's face twisted with rage, her eyes wild as she charged toward Amber, her hands reaching for the papers that held the key to their freedom. But Amber remained resolute, clutching the documents tightly, her gaze fixed on Virginia's contorted expression. She could feel Ashley's tiny hand gripping her arm tightly. Her sister's presence served as a solid support. This time, Amber was determined to stand her ground. "Give those to me," Virginia spat. Her voice was barely recognizable, filled with fury. "You don't understand the situation, Amber." But Amber remained unfazed. She squared her shoulders, her tone unwavering. "I know exactly what I'm doing. These documents prove that this house and everything in it belong to us. You have no right to keep us here or to keep our father from us." Virginia stepped closer, sneering. "You think anyone's going to believe you? I've taken care of everything, Amber. Your father is under my control, and no one is going to listen to two scared little girls." The words hit hard, but Amber held her head high. "Maybe they won't believe us," she replied softly, "but these documents tell the tea Brenda, and the tea Brenda doesn't lie." Virginia's face turned red with anger, but before she could retort, another sound caught their attention. They heard the soft shuffle of footsteps coming from the hallway. Amber's heart soared as she saw her father, Billy, appear in the doorway. His face was pale, eyes clouded with confusion. Leaning against the wall for support, his frail form visibly weakened from months of manipulation and isolation. However, when his eyes landed on Amber and Ashley, a glimmer of recognition sparked in his weary gaze. "Amber, Ashley," he murmured, his voice raspy and broken. "What's happening?" Virginia whipped around, her expression shifting instantly from rage to a mask of feigned innocence. "Billy," she said, her tone oozing with false concern, "these girls have been such a handful. They've been going through your personal belongings. I was just trying to keep them in line." But Billy's gaze shifted back to Amber, and she noticed a flicker of comprehension in his eyes, a faint memory pushing through the fog that Virginia had cast over him. Amber stepped forward, extending the papers toward him. "Papa," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "These are your papers. Mama left them for us so we could be safe. Virginia has been deceiving you and keeping you away from us. She tried to take everything from us." Billy looked down at the documents, his hands trembling as he accepted them from Amber. His gaze moved across the pages, each word appearing to lift the fog that had clouded his thoughts. His expression twisted in disbelief, then sorrow, as the harsh reality began to dawn on him. "Virginia," he murmured, raising his eyes to meet hers. His voice was a mix of pain and indignation. "Is this true? Have you kept my daughters from me? Have you taken what belongs to them?" Virginia's facade of innocence began to crack. Her eyes narrowed as she sensed her grip on the situation was weakening. "Billy, they're lying. You know they're just confused, trying to turn you against me." "Enough!" Billy's voice was now stronger, more resolute. He glared at Virginia with a simmering rage that Amber had never witnessed in him before. "I may be vulnerable, but I'm not blind. I can see it all clearly now." He spoke of how she had warped their family dynamics, turning his daughters into captives within their own home. His voice trembled, heavy with grief that felt almost insurmountable. "I should have recognized it earlier, but no more." Amber felt Ashley snuggle closer to her, both of them gazing at their father with wide, hopeful eyes. For the first time, he appeared to be the man he was before the accident, the man who had once filled their lives with joy and love. Virginia's face hardened. Her voice dropped to a low, menacing tone. "You think you can just cast me aside? After everything I've done for you? I created this life, this house, this family. It was all my doing." Yet Billy shook his head, a quiet resolve evident in his eyes. "You built nothing, Virginia. You destroyed everything. You took my family and tried to reshape it into something cold and harsh, something it was never meant to be. I won't allow you to hurt my daughters any longer." He turned to Amber and Ashley, his eyes reflecting both sorrow and pride. "Come with me, girls," he said gently. "We're leaving this place, and we're leaving her behind." Virginia's face contorted with fury, her voice rising in desperation. "You can't just walk away from me. You'll regret this, Billy." But Billy did not look back. He led Amber and Ashley through the house, his grip steady as he guided them toward the front door. Amber felt a lightness in her heart, an overwhelming sense of relief as they crossed the threshold. The brisk morning air filled her lungs like a promise of liberation. They were finally escaping the prison that Virginia had created, breaking free from the darkness that had choked them for so long. As they stepped out into the open, Amber turned her gaze to her father. Her voice was laced with awe. "Papa, are we truly free?" He looked down at her, his expression softening as he drew her and Ashley in close. "Absolutely, Amber. We are free. I regret it took me so long to realize it, to see you both." His voice trembled with emotion as he hugged them tighter, his warmth dispelling the last remnants of the cold. Together, they strolled through the morning light, each step taking them further from the shadows that had plagued them. Amber felt a sense of calmness that she hadn't felt in what seemed like a very long time leave her body. For the first time, she dared to envision a future that extended beyond the pain and fear. The days that followed were filled with gentle moments of recovery. Amber, Ashley, and their father found a cozy, welcoming house on the outskirts of town, a place where sunlight streamed through wide windows, and the rooms exuded warmth they had once thought was lost to them. Billy dedicated his days to them, slowly healing the scars left by Virginia's cruelty. Bit by bit, his laughter returned as he regained his strength. Amber often caught herself observing Ashley, her sister's face now glowing with the innocence that had nearly been taken from her. They would sit by the window, reminiscing about their mother, sharing memories that kept her spirit alive in their hearts. Amber was extremely appreciative of the tranquil life they were building, a life that, in spite of everything, love had managed to save. One evening, under the stars, Ashley turned to Amber, her voice gentle and filled with wonder. "Do you think Mama knew we'd be okay? That we'd be safe?" Amber smiled, feeling the warmth of her mother's memory envelop her like a soft embrace. "Yes, Ashley. I believe she knew. She always had faith in us, even in tough times. She knew we'd find a way." They sat in silence, gazing at the stars above, a quiet serenity settling around them. Amber felt a buoyancy in her heart, a sense of freedom that came not just from escaping the darkness, but from discovering the strength to cling to hope, even in the bleakest moments. And as the night deepened, Amber understood that whatever lay ahead, they would confront it together, carrying with them the love and courage their mother had instilled in them.